Marty?
Yes.
I now have two messages on my cell phone. One, Spectrum said they'll have the power on 7:30. Now they've revised it up to 8 PM. So it looks like that neighborhood out there in Lewis and Clark neighborhood and maybe other locations, it's going to be without power for a while tonight.
Okay. Looks like Jesse is here. And Amber's here.
Sorry, I was muted, Marty. We're good over on Sussex for now, but
Yeah, I was gonna say Jesse and Amber, Ward 4 are here, so.
Yeah, same here. I'm good for now, but now I'm nervous.
Me too.
Yeah, I had no idea. It's very, very windy.
I'm using a lot of candles.
Oh, is that why it's all flickery?
Hey, Marty, can you promote Madsen Matthias and the attendees to a panelist?
I'd be happy to. Just a moment.
Thank you.
Marty, this is Lee Griffin. Could you do the same for Lee Ratterman, please?
You sure can.
We'll see how long we have power over here. I just had something giant hit the side of my house behind me. The wind is just really
Oh no.
intense.
John, did you get knocked offline too?
Yeah, apologies, folks. My internet just went away. I am not completely sure that it's going to be stable here. Ms. Jones is here, and if you're ready to pick it up, if I disappear, Gwen, I will always endeavor to get back in. But that could be a thing.
Me too. I keep flickering.
Out of the way. Sorry, that rattled my cage a little bit. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I will call the Missoula City Council meeting of November 16th to order. We are clearly in a Zoom webinar this evening, and you all have seen the various ways you can join the meeting and participate. I will note for the record this evening that we have, let's see, who's missing? Mr. Von Lossberg, and that appears to be the only council member not present this evening. We've got minutes of our last meeting. If there are no changes, they'll stand approved. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our schedule of committee meetings. Ms. Raybon.
Thanks, Mayor Engen. So next week is Thanksgiving, and City Council will not be meeting next week, Monday. We are going to meet on the 29th of November. And that's a fifth Monday. Normally we have those off, but we traded the fourth Monday during the week of Thanksgiving for the fifth Monday. So we're setting up committee meetings. It's a long way to say that, for 2 weeks. Hang on just a second and I'll share my screen and show folks how to get to our committee schedule online. So if you Google the City of Missoula, our website will be at the top of your search results. And right here below the big picture in the middle, you'll see a meetings button, and you can press that meetings button. And then you'll see all of our committee meetings that are listed on this calendar. Committee meetings are generally held on Wednesdays. At the top of this page, we have a link here that says most recent committee meeting schedule. And that's kind of an encapsulated form of all of our committees and what council action or what committees are taking up what during the next couple weeks. It looks like I cut off the top, so I will do that when I republish tonight. I made a last minute change to the committee schedule tonight because we had a change in Public Safety and Health Committee, and that meeting will not be going as long as originally anticipated. It will meet from 10:50 to 11 a.m. We had an applicant withdraw from our interview poll number, and then the Administration and Finance Committee will follow from 11:15 to 11:35. We'll be taking up a contract for some software for the HR department and a contract for relationship violence services. The Public Works Committee will follow that from 11:50 to 12:10. They'll be taking up an appointment to the Bike Ped Advisory Board and a bid award for a water main replacement over in the Cooper Street area. Parks and Conservation will meet from 12:40 to 12:45, 12:40 to 12:45, short 5-minute meeting to take up an appointment to the Parks and Rec Board. And Land Use and Planning Committee will round out the day from 1 o'clock to 3:15. They'll be taking up the appointments to the Planning Board. It is appointment season, after all. An update to the West Broadway Community Master Plan, a resolution delaying East Missoula annexation, rezoning on Schilling and Dearborn, and the recreational marijuana ordinance.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any changes to that committee schedule? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is your opportunity to comment on items not elsewhere on our agenda this evening. Mr. Larson.
Yes, Matt Larson, Ward 3. Nice to see everybody. I think this is a good time to reiterate how we need to go back to these hybrid or actually go to the hybrid scenario for these meetings. It's nice that some city employees are able to attend at their offices, but city people are not able to attend. So like internet is a barrier. This whole format is a barrier, and we're just stalling indefinitely to wait for a hybrid meeting scenario to be, bestowed upon us by our leaders. So I think this would be a good time to reiterate how it's needed. And then I'll go on to commenting about the claims later.
Seeing no additional public comment this evening, we will move on to our consent agenda. Items here were approved, pardon me, were approved unanimously in council committees, and we saved a little time by considering them all at once on Monday evenings. As Rabine will read the list of consent agenda items aloud, so folks zooming in or watching in the television audience will know what we're considering, and we'll take comment before we vote. Ms. Rabine.
Thank you, Mary Engen. Hang on just a second. I'll share my screen. We'll take a look at the agenda here. We have kind of a long consent agenda tonight. We have 13 items. Hang on just a second. Let me share. Here we go. Okay. Tonight's consent agenda. There we go. The first item is to pay the city's bills. And this week, council is being asked to approve accounts payable in the amount of $416,828.74 for checks that are dated November 16th of 2021. Number 2 is to set a public hearing on December 6th, 2021 for a resolution of the Missoula City Council increasing the municipal stormwater, wastewater, and water rates for use of the Missoula City utility systems and amending the utility rate schedule to be effective on January 1st of 2022. Number 3 is to set a public hearing on December 6th, 2021 for a resolution of the Missoula City Council amending the current fees for new taps into existing Missoula water system mains, establishing a staff assistance fee, and amending the utility rate schedule to be effective on January 1st of 2022. The 4th is to confirm the mayor's reappointment of Whitney Bergman to the Tourism Business Improvement District for a term that begins on December 1st, 2021 and expires on December 1st, 2025. Number 5 is to authorize the mayor to sign and execute an amendment to the contract with the Poverello Center for the provision of emergency winter shelter services funded by the city of Missoula. Number 6 is the first reading and preliminary adoption of an ordinance. Tonight, City Council is setting a public hearing on November 29th, 2021, and preliminarily adopting an ordinance to amend Missoula Municipal Code, Chapter 2.02, or 2.82, excuse me, entitled Establishment of Continuous Residency Requirements within the city limits for city department heads and supervisory managers. Number 7 is to adopt a resolution relating to $397,000 of stormwater system revenue bonds. This is a part of the Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, or DNRC, Water Pollution Control State Revolving Loan Program. Easy for me to say. Series 2021A, and authorizing the issuance and fixing the terms and conditions thereof. Number 8 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign the renewal of stop loss insurance provided by Voya, that's the name of the company, for option 1 large claim health plan coverage, effective January 1st through December 31st, 2021, for an estimated monthly charge of $73,504. Number 9 is to confirm officers Michael Hatterley, Daniel Kozlowski, and Peyton Holmgren. Those are police officers. Number 10 is to approve the 44 Ranch Subdivision Phase 12 Final Plat. Number 11 is to approve the Howard Razor Business Park Subdivision Phase 2 Final Plat. Number 12 is to approve the Transportation Alternatives Pavement Preservation Grant Agreement and authorize the mayor to sign that agreement. Number 13, our final item, is to approve an agreement between the City of Missoula and Missoula County Public Schools specifying responsibilities for administration of the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant for West Side Park improvements and authorizing the mayor to sign that agreement.
Thank you, Ms. Rabine. Any questions or comments from council members this evening? Mr. Ramos.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I should have emailed this earlier, but I just saw it, was just a little bit curious. I don't think it's anything I have a problem with. I saw that we're spending about $9,000 on a down payment to Olympia Steel Buildings. Is that just for Public Works or something? I was just curious.
Could be Public Works or Parks. We can certainly get an answer for you though, sir.
Okay, sounds good. I have no problem in the meantime voting for it.
Okay. And Ms. Merritt.
I need to recuse myself from voting on item 5.10, as that involves my employer WGM Group.
Thank you, Ms. Merritt. Seeing no additional discussion, anyone in the audience care to comment on items on the consent agenda? Mr. Larson.
Yeah, there's two kind of vague purchases from National Auto Fleet Group or something to that effect for about almost $40,000 each. One is for the cemetery, and it's just a number, anyway. So I just wanted to know what that was about. Also, the Rogers International PLLC charge in the claims over $1,000. They purport to have the contract, I guess, for armed security around the POV. I'm only familiar from seeing their flyers around pot dispensaries, offering security services for them. But I'm just wondering how much we're paying them and how often we're paying them $10,000. And just wondering how that contract came about. That's about it there. I think we should reevaluate these utility rates before we enact these. I think we need, as citizens, an update of the capital of the capital fund of the water department, because there's all these legal battles that are being fought with that fund. So it's hard to argue the validity of these rate hikes when we don't even know how much these legal battles are costing us currently or in the future or all that. So I think we need to really be careful before we start passing this all on to the end user, who is also paying for this on both ends. So there's that. I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff on this consent agenda. I feel like that I could talk for a long time about it, but the marijuana ordinance, I feel like, is just squandering opportunities for you guys, but that's a public hearing that I'll comment on later.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. With regard to cemetery, I'm assuming that's probably a truck or similar equipment for the cemetery. With regard to Rogers International, they provide security around all of the partner agencies where we're providing services for the unhoused, including our emergency shelter, Poverello, and other sites. They were hired as a function of our request for proposals, and are paid according to their contract. And conflating legal battles and water rates, they are separate and have nothing to do with our utility investments. With that, I see no one else in the audience cares to comment on the consent agenda, so we will have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the consent agenda, Anderson,
Yes.
Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes, with abstention on 5.10.
got it? Ramos,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
and West.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 11 ayes and one absent on items, well, except for item 5.10. And on item 5.10, we have 10 ayes, one abstention, one absent.
And the consent agenda is approved. There are no comments this evening from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, nor the community forum. This evening, we do have one special presentation in the form of a proclamation. Whereas small business, whereas small businesses form the backbone of our local economy, generating jobs and improving the quality of life for citizens. And whereas the city of Missoula, Montana supports the effort of local small businesses and recognizes the critical role they play in our community. And whereas Small Business Saturday is a nationwide campaign to cultivate business for small merchants on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And whereas Small Business Saturday will stimulate economic growth locally for small merchants by following in the tradition of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, two of the busiest shopping days of the year, I'm told. And whereas we encourage citizens to consider shopping small merchants on Small Business Saturday as a way to boost the local economy and strengthen our small business community. Now, therefore, I, John Egan, Mayor of the City of Missoula and the state of Montana, do hereby proclaim November 27th, 2021 in Missoula as Small Business Saturday, and encourage our residents to recognize and support small businesses within our community by shopping these establishments on the Saturday following Thanksgiving. That is our lone proclamation this evening. Next, we'll move to public hearings. We have a number of those this evening, and state law and our own council rules set guidelines for inviting comment in a formal way on a variety of issues. Following a staff report on each, council and I will invite comment. We will maintain our public hearing open. We'll keep our public hearing open for a week, and actually in this case 2 weeks, until council considers these items for final approval or denial, as the case may be, at their next regular meeting. Our first staff report this evening is on a resolution for first quarter of fiscal year 22 budget amendments. Ms. Griffin has our staff report this evening.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to share my screen for folks. Short presentation. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to get that a little hidden. So today I'm bringing forward the first, as the mayor said, first quarter FY22 budget amendments. City Council approved the FY22 budget on August 23rd of this year. In doing so, they passed what is called an appropriations resolution, which sets the level, the spending level that each department and fund may spend unless amended. We do in fact have a path for amending the budget. Pursuant to state law, we may amend the budget during the fiscal year by conducting public hearings at regularly scheduled meetings. And we have to follow appropriate state required noticing. The calendar for these amendments are as follows. This was brought to the Administration and Finance Committee on October 27th. Council set these hearings on November 1st. We are here today on November 15th, and the public hearing will be held open until November 29th, as they're held open for 2 hearings during remote meetings. And our deadline for passing this is that November 29th. I am requesting that City Council adopt or deny a resolution amending the annual appropriations for the City of Missoula, Montana, as set forth in the fiscal year 2022 budget and capital improvement program, also known as our community investment program. We have 8 amendments today. CPDI, we've got an existing position that was missed in the reorganization. And in planning, a formula error overstated the expenditures. In fire, we are actually reducing the budget because new FTEs were included both in the new request and in a baseline. So we always go through and try to catch those. And then we've got 4 for parks. And what's happening with the parks respective budget amendments is that parks made a presentation during budget hearings in the summer on August 18th. And there were many pieces that were still in play. And so we're bringing, as numbers and bids and information has become solid, we're bringing forward this amendment to finalize those items. Another piece that we bring forward to City Council during budget amendments, and these are just informational pieces, but we want to bring them forward so folks have all of the information, are carry forwards. These usually consist of contracts or projects that were approved in a prior year and weren't quite concluded in the current fiscal year. And then the last item that we bring forward are budget transfers. Now, this is really just an accounting issue. We've got one budget that ended up in one particular accounting code, but we really should accurately reflect it in a different accounting code. So if folks were to go look at the original adopted budget and then the final budget, there would be changes between those. And a lot of those result from these transfers. So we always want to bring these forward for folks. And we've got 2 pages of those transfers. And that concludes the presentation, and I'm here for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you, Ms. Griffin. As council members know, this is pretty standard housekeeping that we do a few times a year because it turns out there are a lot of numbers in that budget. The public hearing is open. Mr. Larson.
We didn't mention, I guess, the A&E climate specialist or energy specialist that's budgeted here for like $78,000. Just another position, I guess, that the city's going to have. It's on the agenda. It's the last item under what Lee Griffin was just talking about. So I'm wondering what that's about. And just in general, I don't know we should just be very scrupulous on this budget, seeing as how there is no like capital assets list for the entire city. So we don't even know what we're really spending our money on in general. So just wondering, what that position entails. Why do we need that? Why can't we just buy clean energy just on the open market? It just doesn't seem like that big of a thing to do, but again, we just have all these endeavors with rate hikes and stuff like that being used to build a solar array, for instance, that the city's not even going to own, that we'll be the primary consumer of, that will be, again, essentially at the mercy of Northwestern Energy, whether it's connected to the grid or not, too. So it's just, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with our budget. I think we should be very vigilant as far as these errors and transfers are concerned. And I just don't get what this extra staff position is for.
Ms. Griffin.
Thank you. There is some clarity to bring about that staff position. This position is one that is already within the budget, and it is shown in the transfers item. And what the CPDI is requesting is that this budget or this position is actually then inserted into the FY23 baseline budget. So budgeted within 22, and they're requesting that it's brought forward into 23 and shown on the transfers section of the exhibit. Thank you.
I will also note for the record that the city of Missoula does not produce a list in the form that Mr. Larson insists that we should have a list, and we ain't gonna. That does not translate into we don't know what we're spending our money on, nor that we don't know what we have. I see no additional participants in the audience for the public hearing, so we'll hold this one open until the 29th. Oh, we've got someone coming in now. Mr. Corwald. Looks like you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Great. I understand that this, what we're talking about now is the clean position for the clean, based on the clean energy resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, I'll start my comments now. Mayor Engren, City Council members and staff, good evening, and thanks for your opportunity to provide public comment. My name is R. Mark Corwald. I'm here tonight to comment on the city's 100% clean energy resolution. Specifically, I want to talk about the city's council's $100,000 capacity building fund in the FY22 climate action budget. We propose using a proportion of that funding to hire a full-time employee clean energy specialist for this fiscal year. I don't think that we have to discuss what climate change is or why it's essential to limit the burning of fossil fuels. We can all see what's happening to our world as a result of the last 250 years of fossil fuel burning. Last year, I watched trainloads of coal going through Makula with fear and anger and wondered what I could do to stop this irreparable and ongoing harm. The harm is ongoing not only in burning the fossil fuels, but in extracting it from our land. I read recently that China alone, the People's Republic of China alone, burns 5.6 million tons of coal every week. They plan on increasing their coal-powered electrical capacity until 2030, and the rest of the world burns a similar amount of coal every week. In the face of this, I realize that any dramatic action on my own is useless, but that I need to do something. My choice is to do my best to influence policy. This seems to be the only way I can get to make a difference. Regardless of what others do, I must take responsibility for my own actions. Climate change affects the world and all of Montanans. Our economy here in Montana is affected because of megafires, because megafires are expensive to fight. The effects of wildlife, smoke, and public health, property values, and recreation dollars are immense. Our number one industry, agriculture, is being affected by heat, drought, and climate chaos, but so is our number two industry, recreation. Loss of cold water fisheries and the reputation of Montana as a pristine vacation land will result in huge losses of jobs and tax revenue for our state. In Missoula, the City Council resolution has a goal of 100% clean energy by 2030. The proposed clean energy position can help us do our part in this global effort. With the passage of the new federal infrastructure legislation and the possibility of additional legislation in the Build Back Better plan, a clean energy specialist will be essential for understanding the complexities of these laws and how they will apply to Montana and Missoula. This information could help us stop the building of the insane Laurel methane plant. We need to do our part for a cleaner future for our children, grandchildren, and all the generations yet to come. I urge you to vote yes on the proposition for a clean energy specialist. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Harmon.
Thank you, Mayor Engen. If I may ask, I was helping a friend who wanted to give public comment tonight. I was helping him do that. And if Bill Gear is there to speak, then I will refrain from speaking.
Okay, and Bill just showed up, Dave,
All right.
So we'll thank you for being a facilitator. Take care. Mr. Gear.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Okay, I was a little uncertain how to get on. Thank you for Dave Harmon for introducing me. I'm a retired fish and wildlife biologist, and I spent much of my 40-year career assessing the impacts of anthropogenic climate change and the effects on fish and wildlife and the implications for hunting and fishing. And now in retirement, I continue my climate change work as a volunteer on a leadership team of 350 Montana, and I'm on the board of directors of the Montana Wildlife Federation, Hellgate Hunters and Anglers, and Conservation Hawks, a climate change nonprofit I helped form in 2012. So I spend pretty much my life addressing climate change, even in retirement. And I am a strong supporter of your 100% clean electricity resolution and the call for the new position to help move that forward. I recommend that we authorize that position. I think it's critical for moving forward to drafting a plan and roadmap to implement the clean electricity resolution. And that roadmap must specify what needs to happen and when, the material support called for, and who needs to do it. And the breadth and complexity of your conservation and climate action plans clearly calls for a staff effort spearheaded by specialists to keep them focused on the long-range goals and day-to-day work of city and county staff and the acquisition and utilization of funding and equipment to bring the goals to functional reality. Without the clean energy specialist hired as soon as practicable, the climate action goals are not likely to be met. And the coming climate catastrophe compels action, not just words and intent. And nothing in the clean electricity resolution calls for a casual or unfocused approach that can be simply picked up by your present staff who already have essential full-time duties. The city of Missoula should hire the clean energy specialist to provide the intense focus that is called for, and also must provide the budget policy and other essential support to ensure that the resolution succeeds for the benefit of all citizens. And thank you for the city council and staff for the work you've done on those resolutions, the clean energy resolution, the clean electricity resolution, and your commitment to climate change and ameliorating the most harmful effects. I hope you keep up the good work, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Gear. All right, seeing no additional folks with hands raised to comment, questions or comments from council in advance of your November 29th deliberations? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Griffin. We will move on to our second public hearing, which is a request to rezone 2520 Schilling Street, 2134 Dearborn Avenue. And our staff report this evening comes from Caitlin McCafferty.
Hello, can everyone hear me and see my screen?
We can, thanks.
Yay. Okay, so this is a rezone. It's a request from Paul Forsting of IMEG Corp on behalf of Lower Construction DNC LLP, the landowner, to rezone the properties addressed at 2520 Schilling Street and 2134 Dearborn Avenue. The property is proposed to be rezoned from RM 2.7 multi-dwelling to B2-2 community business. The regulatory authority and parameters, Montana Code annotated details the zoning amendment procedures, as well as Title 20. City Council has authority over all amendments to regulations or district boundaries. A public hearing on zoning amendments is required by City Council and Planning Board. We had the Planning Board hearing, and we are here today for the City Council hearing. There is an opportunity for valid protest petitions. However, that has not been submitted for this case. And finally, City Council may not impose conditions on zoning amendments resulting in standard zoning districts under Title 20, which is the case for this request. This is the property location outlined here in blue. It includes two parcels located at 2520 Schilling Street and 2134 Dearborn Avenue at the northeast corner of Schilling and Dearborn. Again, right in blue. It's part of Franklin to Fort Neighborhood Council and City Council Ward 5. The parcel addressed 2520 Schilling, the smaller one, is currently occupied by a warehouse used for auto and industrial equipment sales. And this parcel right here, fronting Dearborn, has a residential camper on the property. Otherwise, it's vacant. This aerial is just old. The surrounding properties contain residential, single and duplexes, as well as multi-dwelling and a nearby warehouse. And it's adjacent to the Bitterroot Branch Trail and about a 0.5 mile, 0.6 miles from the Southgate Mall. Here are the pictures of how the site looks today. This is the east side from Schilling Street. That's the warehouse we talked about. And this is that vacant parcel that fronts Dearborn. You can see in the distance that camper that I mentioned. This is the current zoning map. As you can see, the parcel right here is currently zoned RM 2.7 multi-dwelling. And it's completely encompassed by that same zone, except for a little bit on the south borders commercial district C1-4. That's neighborhood commercial. It also exists on the west and north of the subject parcels block. For the growth policy, as you can see, the parcels are located within the pink and orange area, which identifies the land use designation of community mixed use. This designation supports high intensity commercial uses that serve community needs such as retail, financial institutions, professional and personal services, offices, and high density residential. This is mainly because it's close to the mall and integrated with main transportation corridors, including public transit and active transportation systems. As you may know, also it borders this residential medium high density right across Schilling right here, which is in between residential medium and residential high density. So it's more of a transition zone for land use. When thinking about the growth policy, I think it's important, especially for this one, to note this below quote on page 114, that decisions and implementation based on these designations should include consideration of the entire growth policy, which includes site-specific conditions. For this case, it's really important to note the on-the-ground uses that are primarily residential for the surrounding parcels. Continuing on to the growth policy, as everyone has probably seen the current relatable zoning for community mixed use. That is what this parcel is designated as for land use. Again, high intensity commercial, serving general community needs, and high density residential intermixed within it. The relatable zonings for this are C1-4, C2-4, and M1R-2. Going back to the zoning map, C1-4 is what is surrounding. However, when thinking about the growth policy comprehensively, it's definitely important to pull out a couple of things. First is the fourth goal from the housing element, which says that, which is the goal to provide for the diverse housing needs while protecting a strong sense of place in the community and neighborhoods through compatible residential developments. Highlighting this compatible, again, speaking to the subject parcel being surrounded by a lot of single family and duplex and a couple multi-dwelling residential uses. Similarly, in the livability element, their goal, that element's goal for Missoula will make thoughtful decisions about land use planning that support the needs and values of residents in regards to neighborhoods and community character, parks, trails, and natural resources. That is a similar thing, just keeping in mind comprehensively what is on the ground, what's surrounding it, as well as this land use designation with the current relatable zoning. Because of that, C1-4, C2-4, and M1R-2 seems to be too high intense of a zone to put on this parcel. Things like gas stations and auto-oriented uses don't seem appropriate for a parcel that's surrounded by residential uses. Therefore, staff's recommending a more transitional zone to not hop directly from residential to commercial. That zone that we are recommending is B2-2, community business, shown here on the proposed map. The current project is proposing a multi-dwelling residential project. However, the parcel, this rezoning is not for the multi-dwelling use, or to approve that. This rezoning is just in the scope of the rezone if it follows the growth policy. The reason we chose B2-2, it keeps the intent of the growth policy in the land use designation, but it takes the intensity of the approved uses down. So those high intense uses such as construction businesses, manufacturing, motor vehicle repairs that don't fit within the larger context of the neighborhood would not be permitted. The commercial uses such as that are less intense, offices, things of that nature, coffee shop, as well as multi-dwelling residential will be permitted in B2-2. So this is the zoning comparisons, or first, sorry, this is the growth policy comparison side, just before we leave the growth policy. So this is B2-2. This is what staff is recommending right here. And then this C1-4, C2-4, M1R-2. These are the relatable zones that are connected to that land use designation. The main differences being that allowed uses, so high intensity commercial versus a lower intensity commercial. And overall, staff is stating that B2-2 follows the growth policy more than these commercial or industrial districts. And that's what we're recommending for this proposed rezone. Now going from recommending a new zone to comparing the current zone, RM 2.7, to the recommended zone, B2-2. So to illustrate these differences, I made this little side-by-side chart. The main differences are highlighted in yellow. Basically, right now, the parcel holds the parcel, sorry, is is a bit over 21,000 square feet. When it's zoned RM 2.7, that's 2,700. That's one dwelling unit per 2,700 square feet, which would be maximum 8 dwelling units. If the rezone is approved to B2-2, the new zone B2-2 would allow for up to 21 dwelling units. The parcel for setbacks, technically they all stay the same. And I'll show an illustration on the next slide to help us make sense. But because the subject parcels are completely encompassed by residential districts and uses, the setbacks from those uses are taken over to B2-2. So on the grounds, they will look the same. However, in a B2-2 zone in a vacuum, they would have different setbacks. And again, I'll explain that with the picture. Height is a bit different. It goes from 30 to 35 feet, depending on the roof pitch, to 35 feet on the property line. Plus, the developer can add in height based on stepping back the building by 6 inches or an upper floor step back, and it can get up to 50 feet. And again, I also have another illustration on the next slide to make this make a little bit more sense. Units per acre results or references density, which we went over, and then the allowed uses are a big difference between the two. Actually, not super big, but anyways, RM 2.7's got residential, some civic and tourist home uses. B2-2 brings in some low intensity commercial, offices, restaurant, food and beverage, and general retail, grocery store, things like that. But again, not high intensity auto oriented or construction businesses like in a commercial district. So this is the illustrations I alluded to. So this is the subject parcel right here, and these will be the required setbacks. These setbacks are because this parcel and this parcel are used and zoned as residential, as well as all these across the alley. The rear setback is technically 20 feet or 25%, depending on which is less, and 20 feet is less. So this would be the constraints that any development would have to follow. In terms of height, when referencing upper story step back, right here in this blue circle, that's what Title 20 means. And so they can build, they can start at the setback and build up to 35 feet. And then if they set it back more than it's intended, they can build up a little bit higher. They can add in these design elements, stepping it back to get higher that way. But they can't build straight 50 feet right at any of those required setbacks. Again, this is a rezone, and so what council is voting on and considering is just the rezone, not the development project itself. However, it's helpful just to get an idea of the intent and why the applicant is, what the applicant's thinking, what's their vision, and this is where they are right now. This is super preliminary, and it's not tied to the vote in any way. However, just for illustration's sake, the intended vision of this project is to build 3 multi-dwelling residential buildings. One here, here, and here. All Title 20 requirements that are applicable must be met before any permit is approved. This includes parking, open space requirements for multi-dwelling buildings. Depending on the size of the units, parking will be either 1, 1.5, or 2 spaces per unit, but it will be required. Reductions such as being close to a transit served location and bicycle parkings exist. However, these details are out of the scope of the rezone, and they'll be evaluated for Title 20 compliance at the time of building permit review. Open space and activity area is required, and that will be subject to review and approval both by City Planning and Parks Department. For the elevations, again, this is super preliminary. It's just to give some type of a flavor of what the applicant is thinking. So not part of the approval, will definitely be reviewed for Title 20 compliance. However, is included to help paint a picture of the applicant's vision and the reason for this rezoning request. The review criteria for a rezone, staff is recommending that based on this review criteria provided in Title 20 zoning ordinance. First, does it comply with the growth policy? Staff states that the proposed zoning B2-2 community business provides less intensive commercial uses and equal housing density as compared to the zoning districts listed as applicable to community mixed use designation in the growth policy, those commercial uses, those commercial zones. As this is all in consideration of the parcels abutting residential uses. The B2-2 zoning district is supported by city staff because it is one that is consistent with the density of the corresponding zoning districts, while simultaneously prohibiting those more intense commercial uses that could disturb surrounding residents. Next, the rezoning facilitates the adequate provision of public services, including transportation, water, schools, parks, and other public requirements. Because the area is inside the urban growth area boundaries, it fronts 2 streets that are served by public transit, bicycle facilities, and lined with sidewalks. It's in the sewer service area and served by water and sewer. Third, the rezoning reflects compatible urban growth because it permits compatible residential and community business development in an area that includes mainly residential and some commercial uses. The site could be developed with limited commercial activity, allowing residents to access services without the need to rely on car travel. And it allows for an increase in allowed residential density in an area that also includes residential uses and infrastructure to serve an increase of residents. Fourth, the rezoning will promote public health, safety, and the general welfare by providing for residential uses in an area with access to sewer, public water, emergency services, streets, bike facilities, and fire protection, as well as taking into consideration the intensity of those permitted uses with the proposed zoning. And finally, the rezoning to B2-2 is suitable for the subject property and considers the character of the district, which contains various residential uses, borders a commercial district, and has access to urban infrastructure and services. When this went to planning board, a public hearing at planning board recommended the approval of this rezone with a vote of 6 A's and 0 nays. The planning board discussion was mainly focused on neighbors' concerns with the increase in density and height, also parking and open space requirements. The meeting also contained a reminder that to attendees that the basis for the vote they were taking was primarily to determine if the proposed density allowed by the zoning change was in line with the growth policy, which staff determined that it is. It wrapped up with planning board recommending the approval because the request is in line with growth policies, land use designations, goals, and objectives. And therefore, there's no motion today. That's for 2 weeks with final consideration. But staff recommends the approval of the adoption of an ordinance to rezone lots 20 to 24 of Carline Addition, Block 34, lots 18B, and 6,286 square feet of lots 17, 18, 19 of Carline Addition, number 3, Block 34, all located in Section 32, Township 12 North, and Range 19 West from RM 2.7 multi-dwelling to B2-2 community business. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. McCafferty. And Ms. Merritt, did you have a clarifying question before I open public hearing?
Yes, I did. If you could go back to, I think it was slide number 12. There was just something I saw there that I wanted to ask about, and I understand that this is preliminary. Kind of in the lower corner of the drawing, there's an area that's kind of bubbled out.
Mm-hmm.
And I only ask this because that looks to be maybe some traffic calming that they're contemplating there, or maybe, no, maybe that's just that tree.
Looks like they're preserving a tree by bumping out the
Got it.
curb.
Okay.
Yeah, that's required by parks to preserve that tree.
Okay, it totally makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. McCafferty, if you would mind unsharing your screen or taking it back, or whatever the right term of art is for that in the world of Zoom. I will see if there are any attendees interested in commenting on this proposed rezone. And seeing none, again, this item will remain open for consideration until council meets again on the 29th. And the questions or comments from council members. Ms. Anderson.
Thanks so much, Mr. Mayor. And this is something that I've heard quite a bit about from the neighbors in the area, given that this is Ward 5, and want to flag for those who are listening. I know several people said that they weren't able to attend the meeting, but would be listening in later, and encourage them to attend land use and planning on Wednesday. I have asked Aaron Wilson from the Transportation Department to attend that meeting to provide a little bit more information around some of the traffic calming that has taken place in the area over the summer, and how, kind of what they have planned in the future. Understanding that we can't rezone, that's not a condition, but it's definitely brought up a lot of community conversation, and want to provide that opportunity to give more details to the community about how we take into consideration things around traffic for projects like this. So just wanted to flag that for folks, that it will be an additional topic for land use and planning this coming week.
It's seeing no further discussion. Thank you again, Ms. McCafferty, for a thorough report and a professional recommendation for council to consider. We'll move on to our third and final public hearing of the evening. This is on what I like to call Title 420, but it is not. This is an amendment to our zoning ordinance, creating a recreational marijuana ordinance. And we have a whole team here to deliver this complex and emergent ordinance for your consideration this evening, as well as the residents we serve. And I'm not sure who's starting, so I'm going to let somebody.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will wait for this to cool. So I wanted to reintroduce everyone presenting today. From the planning and land use team is Cassie Trepard, a senior planner, Spencer Stark, an associate planner, and I am Madsen Mathias, an assistant planner. A team of us in CPDI have been collaborating on updates to our land use regulations with regard to cannabis uses since the recent ballot initiative was passed and the bill was produced to allow for recreational cannabis use in the state. As a reminder, you may notice that the presentation we are giving this evening is identical to the one we gave last Wednesday at LUP. We are representing the information for the benefit of the public and to inform any existing comments and concerns. So first, I wanted to review the history of this issue and why we are here. The state has allowed for medical cannabis use since 2004 when the first initiative was passed. There's been a lot of back and forth on how that's been administered, allowed for, and enforced, but it's always been contained to medical. Last year, there was a new ballot initiative that called for legalization of recreational or adult use in the bill, cannabis use, passing with 56.9% approval in the county, which is a recent change for the city, county, and state. The state legislature passed a bill to address and implement this change in the last legislative session. And we at the city are responding to this as the bill encourages local governments to integrate our cannabis business categories into the new state regulations and update our regulations locally. So we have had the opportunity to look into how we address medical marijuana in the past, how other places have responded to this type of legislation, both statewide and nationwide. And our aim has been to propose a reasonable and responsible set of regulatory revisions that will address future impacts of this new bill here in Missoula. And we have additionally been given direction from leadership in development services to prepare recommendations to address energy consumption related to cannabis cultivation and manufacturing. Go ahead. So within the last year, starting in November of 2020, voters approved Initiative 190, which directed state legislatures to draft and adopt House Bill 701, legalizing adult recreational cannabis in the state of Montana. As a part of this bill, the legislature directed the Department of Revenue to draft licensing rules for adult recreational cannabis use by this past October 1st of 2021. It's meant to facilitate the implementation of legalized recreational cannabis, allowing for existing medical businesses licensed before November of 2020 to convert to recreational before allowing new recreational license applications on July 1st of 2023. Recreational business licenses comprise cultivation, dispensaries, manufacturing, as well as a few more obscure licenses. Go ahead, next. So I also want to give a brief overview of some of that criteria outlined in the House bill. Much of this has served as the foundation for what we do and don't need to address at a local level. Pertinent building and land use regulations include the prohibition of drive-throughs or transferring product through a drive-up window, prohibition on advertising, including electronic media. A cannabis business may not also sell alcohol, tobacco, or hemp. They have limited hours they can be open. Cultivation and manufacturing specifically cannot be visible from the public right-of-way in public areas. And the state sets a buffer of 500 feet between cannabis businesses and schools and places of worship. So additionally, this chart below outlines some of the timelines and restrictions based on who may apply for certain licenses at what time and under which constraints. Medical licenses may be applied for at any time, including today and after the turn of the year. They will not be able to become immediately recreational, but must wait until July of 2023. As was mentioned, the recreational licenses are only available to businesses that were licensed as medical back in November of 2020, and cultivator licenses additionally have a couple of restrictions on them. So until July of 2023, cultivators may not expand beyond an absolute canopy size of tier 5 or 10,000 square feet. And anyone who was not cultivating outdoors prior to the passing of Initiative 190 in November of 2020 cannot start cultivating outdoors. Go ahead, next. So currently, with this map, it demonstrates there are approximately 70 cannabis-related businesses within the city of Missoula. 50 of those are dispensary businesses, and the remaining 20 are split between cultivators, manufacturers, and mixed-use businesses, meaning a combination of the four. This map, while displaying the number of cannabis businesses in town, also shows some concentration of these businesses in a few areas. Now I'll pass it off to Spencer. Thank you.
As presented previously, staff has prepared a draft ordinance for City Council's consideration that aims to address 4 impacts, mitigate 4 impacts related to the passage of the adult use cannabis regulations. The first is to align Title 20 definitions and use classifications with state definitions. The second is to prohibit commercial cultivation and manufacturing as home occupations. The third is to preserve a diverse mix of uses by implementing a buffer between dispensaries. And finally, to limit non-transparent glazing by prohibiting the use of frosted or otherwise non-transparent glazing for dispensaries. Staff has proposed an ordinance generally amending Title 20 Missoula Municipal Code, the city zoning ordinance, to incorporate revisions in the following chapters: 2010 Business and Commercial Districts, 2015 Industrial and Manufacturing Districts, 2040 Use and Building Specific Standards, 2045 Accessory Uses and Structures, 2100 Terminology, and 2105 Use Classifications to incorporate regulations concerning legislative changes in the cannabis industry. One of these proposed amendments is to amend the use classifications, specifically 210540W retail sales, which is the subsection of our commercial use groups that outline the types of uses that are associated with retail sales. Staff is proposing to include cannabis dispensaries in this definition. As a result, cannabis dispensaries would be allowed in all B business and commercial districts, as well as all industrial districts. This map illustrates the areas where dispensaries would be permitted within the city of Missoula. The areas in blue, pink, red, and light pink are all areas that would permit cannabis dispensaries.
Okay, so to implement the buffer between dispensaries and the glazing transparency standards, a new section will be created under 2040 Use and Building Specific Standards. The new section 2040-83 will apply specific requirements to cannabis uses. Per A applicability, these standards will apply to both medical and recreational cannabis uses, new or existing, unless specifically exempted. B1 location implements the 500-foot buffer between dispensaries. It states cannabis dispensaries shall be located a minimum distance of 500 feet from other cannabis dispensaries. And these distances shall be measured from parcel line to parcel line and apply only to ground floor dispensary businesses. The 500-foot buffer distance is intended to preserve a diverse mix of uses in each commercial block so that people can access multiple everyday services within their area. I'll dig into the specific language for the glazing portion of this section on another slide since it's quite lengthy. B3 states ordinary maintenance and repair of existing structures shall be exempt from the requirements of this section. Ordinary maintenance does not include the replacement, modification, or addition of glazing. And this concept is standard for other zoning regulations. It essentially states that aside from making changes to glazing, the business owners will be able to maintain the building without coming into full compliance with the regulations. Next. And then as a note, we've heard there is a bit of confusion around what legal nonconforming means. Legal nonconforming is a section in Title 20, and any businesses that have already been approved before these regulations are implemented will be able to continue operating at their current licensed address in their current state. If the dispensary moves and a different use comes into that space, then it loses nonconforming status. At that point, a new business would not be able to move into the buffer. This does not mean a business could move to a different location within the buffer. They would only be allowed to stay at their current location or find a new location outside of the buffer. So updated buffer maps were included as attachments to the staff report. Not all maps were included with the presentation, so let me know if you'd like me to pull up any of them during the discussion. I also have maps I can pull up for expanded school buffers if we would like to review them during the discussion period as well. Zoning districts permitting dispensaries are shown in pink. Existing dispensaries are shown as green dots, and the rings around them are the proposed buffers, measured from the parcel line as stated in the proposed ordinance. The maps now show places of worship and associated buffers as well. Staff are still proposing the ordinance distance dispensaries by 500 feet. The 500-foot buffer would only allow about one ground floor dispensary per every block and a half in the downtown area. Standard block downtown is about 300 feet. And the 500-foot buffer still leaves available area in permitted zoning districts while preventing future clustering. Next slide. An increased 1,000-foot dispensary buffer, in addition to the state required school and place of worship buffer, leaves little space in permitted zoning districts for new dispensaries. Staff believe a buffer of this size would be too large, since the goal of the buffer is to preserve a mix of uses without preventing new dispensaries from entering the market. While there has been talk of implementing a larger buffer, staff are still recommending the 500 feet. We are trying to solve an issue of oversaturation, but don't want to be so restrictive that we limit the economic development that these businesses could bring. We've heard from business owners that they also have difficulty finding space to lease already, just based on their use. So a larger buffer could inhibit opportunities for these businesses to start up in Missoula. Council asked if staff could provide maps that show how many dispensaries would be allowed at different buffers. After speaking with our GIS specialists, this sort of mapping would take thousands of maps and days to complete, so we determined it wasn't a great use of staff time. That sort of mapping also assumes that every available commercial space would be filled with a dispensary, which isn't quite a realistic scenario. So instead, we did some rough density calculations to paint a better picture. Next slide. So in the central business district, which is downtown, a 500-foot buffer would allow about 7 dispensaries if we were starting with a clean slate. And on the map, you can see there are about 5 dispensaries in the CBD area, so 2 more would be permitted from there. The hip strip is already at maximum capacity with the 500-foot buffer, so even at this buffer, no more dispensaries would be permitted in that location. Next slide. At 750 feet, only about 3 dispensaries would be permitted in the central business district. There are already more than that now. Of course, that depends on how they would be placed. Next slide. And then most restrictive at 1,000 feet, we would have many more legal non-conforming businesses downtown. For reference, if we were starting with a blank slate, then this buffer would really only allow about 1 or 2 dispensaries in the central business district, depending on how they would be theoretically placed. Staff believe that a 1,000-foot buffer is overly restrictive, considering no other use, such as bars, regular retail stores, or restaurants have a buffer requirement. And the 500-foot buffer gets to the goal of preventing oversaturation and preserving a diverse mix of uses. And because it meets that goal, staff don't see a need to go overboard with this requirement. Next slide. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize that was in there. That sort of shows our buffer density calcs that we brought up. And to get those, we really just took the area of that zoning district and divided it by those proposed buffers. And that's how we got the 7 for 500, 3 for 750, and 1 for 1,000. Next slide. Okay, so here's the proposed ordinance language for dispensary glazing under the new cannabis use and building specific standards section. It states glazed area requirements shall apply to that area of the ground floor building facade facing a public street up to the finished ceiling height of the ground floor building facade. This section does not apply to parcels within design excellence with a design excellence overlay. The focus of this requirement is to protect building frontage activation on street-facing ground floor storefronts. This is why it does not apply to other building facades or upper story businesses. Additionally, these transparency requirements are already in the design excellence overlay, so these standards would only apply to dispensaries outside of the overlay. New dispensaries will have to incorporate glazing, including windows, doors, and other transparencies to encompass at least 30% of the ground floor building facade under B2A. per B2G. In the event that an existing structure does not meet the 30% glazing requirements, any existing glazing must be maintained. So of the 30% glazing or maintained glazing, window and door glass meeting the following transparency standards count as glazed area. The glazing must have visible light transmittance of 60% or more and external reflectance of 20% or less. These transparency standards essentially prohibit dark tinting, frosted glass, and application of window decals. B2C provides a means of alternative compliance, stating display windows that do not provide views into the interior of a building may be counted towards satisfying up to 50% of the minimum glazed area requirements, provided that they are internally illuminated and are at least 2 feet in depth. This option is provided in design excellence and should be offered equally to other areas. The standards in B2D through B2F also exist in design excellence, so staff propose applying these standards equally to dispensaries outside of the overlay by adding them to this section. B2F states interior walls and other interior visual obstructions are prohibited within 6 feet of any facade area counting toward glazed area. This code prevents business owners from placing a wall directly in front of the storefront, which would result in a dead zone. And lastly, B2H states that in the event that these minimum glazed area requirements conflict with city building energy code requirements, the building energy code governs. Next. So staff recommend prohibiting commercial cannabis cultivation and cannabis product manufacturing as home occupations. To do so, Title 20, Section 204550E11 will be amended to include commercial cannabis cultivation or manufacturing. And this section is already in Title 20 and lists uses prohibited as home occupations.
In addition, staff is proposing.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second. We have just a slight technical issue for our transcriptionist. I just need to tell that person for the record that the last 2 speakers were Spencer Stark and Cassie Trippard. And now you may proceed, Spencer. Thank you.
Spencer Stark, Associate Planner for the record. Staff is proposing to amend chapter or Title 20, 10550D. This is our industrial use group classification, our manufacturing, production, industrial services, to include cannabis cultivation divided up across our 3 subtypes, dependent on the square footage of the canopy area for an individual cannabis cultivation operation. We would classify cannabis cultivations up to 1,000 square feet in canopy area as artisanal manufacturing, and cannabis cultivation operations of no more than 2,500 square feet in canopy area as limited manufacturing. And then we would classify general cannabis cultivation as any would permit any legally established canopy square footage. In addition, our current proposal includes cannabis manufacturing as a general industrial use classification. So as stated previously, cannabis cultivation operations of no more than 1,000 square feet of canopy area would be allowed as an artisanal manufacturing use. This would be a conditional use in B1 and B2 districts and permitted outright in B3 and commercial districts and industrial manufacturing districts. Limited manufacturing would comprise those cannabis cultivations facilities of no more than 2,500 square feet in cultivation or canopy area, and would be a conditional use in B3 districts and permitted outright in commercial and industrial districts. Finally, cannabis cultivations of any size, any legally permitted size, would be permitted in our industrial district, shown in the light pink and dark pink on your screen. In addition, some concerns have been presented regarding cannabis manufacturing, the proposed general manufacturing designation. There are a range of methods for extracting cannabis, resulting in a broad scope of impacts. In addition, there are similar uses that are permitted in more zoning districts than those than the proposed cannabis manufacturing classification. Staff has been in conversation with our fire department and to determine the relative scope of impacts that may be present depending on the type of extraction method utilized, and are exploring whether a more lenient classification for cannabis cultivations, or at least some types of cannabis manufacturing methodologies would be appropriate.
Okay, so staff presented the draft ordinance to Planning Board at a public hearing on November 2nd. Planning Board briefly discussed the buffer and concerns that it was not large enough to combat oversaturation of dispensaries. However, they did not propose amendments to expand the 500-foot buffer. The majority of the discussion focused on energy consumption at cannabis cultivation businesses. Cannabis cultivation is known to be highly energy intensive. Staff recommended that methods for regulating energy consumption for cultivation be better researched, and that amendments be made to Title V, which regulates businesses, as a separate project from this proposal. Planning Board was concerned over the timeline for amending Title V as a separate project from Title 20 amendments. Concern for urgent climate action was expressed. Planning Board deliberated over whether zoning code is the appropriate location for energy regulations. The county is planning to include cultivation energy regulations in their zoning code, and Planning Board thought the city should do the same. Planning Board voted 5-1 to amend staff's recommended motion to include cultivation energy consumption regulations in Title 20 zoning code. The amendment included specific language that lighting power density for indoor cannabis cultivation facilities must not exceed 36 watts per square foot in the grow area. One member of Planning Board voted against this amendment, stating that they had not done research on their own and did not feel comfortable voting to approve the very specific 36 watts per square foot number. Before you is Planning Board's recommended motion. However, this is not the motion staff will be recommending. Staff do not believe that zoning code is the appropriate place to regulate cultivation energy use. Title 20 zoning code is subject to the legal non-conforming provisions. This means that once a business is approved, we cannot apply new regulations retroactively to existing businesses that are not proposing changes to the building. Placing energy consumption regulations in zoning code would mean that we cannot bring any existing cultivation operations into compliance. They would be able to continue using non-compliant energy intensive lighting. Staff are recommending Title V be amended to include provisions for energy, because we could ask that existing cultivation operations come into compliance at business license renewal. This would allow us to ensure existing cultivation businesses are working to be more sustainable. Additionally, the city has more options than the county for places to regulate energy. The county must rely heavily on their zoning code as a primary tool, whereas the city has other titles providing us with more options. If given direction from council, staff would like to begin the process for amending Title V immediately. Our research has shown that specific watts per square footage requirement may not be the only way or necessarily the best way to implement energy consumption regulations. Currently, we're researching the best methods for doing this. We would like to approach this as a separate project to reach out to stakeholders, members of the industry, and to do additional research. This will allow us to comprehensively determine which method makes the most sense, which methods are enforceable, and which methods take the industry's knowledge of lighting needs into account.
Staff has gone through a robust process to notify the public and to consult with both internal city agencies and external stakeholders. The process began in August with the creation of Engage Missoula post, which is our Engage Missoula is the city's public-facing website where we publish notices on development proposals. On September 13th, City Council set an agenda for the white paper with a subsequent LUP meeting on the 15th to start the public process and set the public hearing date for this evening. On September 24th, staff met with members of the cannabis industry locally and with Missoula business stakeholders. On October 5th, staff met with the Missoula Downtown Association Board of Directors. On October 8th, staff solicited comment from city agencies and community stakeholders via an agency memo. On October 17th, a legal ad was published in the Missoulian. On October 19th, staff presented at a special presentation in front of the planning board. On October 24th, another legal ad was published in the Missoulian. On November 1st, City Council had its first reading of the proposed ordinance on the consent agenda. On November 2nd, staff conducted a public hearing in front of the planning board. And on November 10th, an informational item, or this was presented as an informational item in front of the Land Use and Planning Board. And this evening, we're conducting our first public hearing in front of City Council with a final consideration on November 29th, 2 weeks from today, in front of City Council. So far, staff has received 5 public comments. We received 1 public comment shortly before this meeting. The public comment was not included or sent to City Council at this time, but will be sent after this meeting. Briefly, the comment was discussing the proposal by Planning Board to institute a 36 watt per square foot requirement for cultivation. There are several concerns listed in the public comment. Most of the concerns were geared around whether this was the most appropriate way to implement an energy conservation measure, and whether or not it was burdensome for the cultivation industry. In summary, staff is proposing to amend or proposing an ordinance that would amend Title 20, the City of Missoula's zoning code, to align Title 20 definitions with state definitions in regards to the newly adopted House Bill 701. This looks like updating the land use classifications to include cannabis uses. Secondly, staff is proposing to prohibit commercial cultivation and manufacturing as a home occupation. We're also proposing to preserve a diverse mix of uses by implementing a 500-foot buffer between dispensaries. And finally, we're proposing to limit non-transparent glazing for dispensaries across the city. Staff has 2 recommended motions. The first is that Missoula City Council adopt an ordinance generally amending Title 20, Missoula Municipal Code, the city zoning ordinance to incorporate revisions in the following chapters: 2010 business and commercial districts, 2015 industrial and manufacturing districts, 2045 accessory uses and structures, 2100 terminology, and 2105 use classifications, and creation of 2040 083 in use and building specific standards to incorporate regulations concerning legislative changes in the cannabis industry. Staff is also recommending a motion that City Council directs city staff to proceed with amendments to Title 5, Missoula Municipal Code, the Business Licenses and Regulations Ordinance to incorporate revisions regarding energy consumption for cannabis businesses. This concludes staff's presentation. Staff is available for questions and comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I could trouble you to take the slideshow down. First, I want to thank, before I open the public hearing, I just want to thank staff. This team has done remarkable work in sorting through piles of tedium regulations of multiple jurisdictions, has reached out to industry, has reached out to community, and what resulted in a 28-page PowerPoint this evening looks like 1 gajillion hours of work. So you all did terrifically this evening. So thank you for that concise and thoughtful presentation. You've given council lots to consider. And I think you've done a great job of informing the folks we serve what this means. The only thing I will say for the record and for audience is that everyone else calls it glass, but in municipal government, we call it glazing. So, and we engage in a lot of glazing, as it turns out. So that I will open the public hearing again with a reminder that the public hearing will remain open for 2 weeks until council takes this item under consideration on the 29th of November. And I do not have a hand up in our attendees box this evening. Are there questions or comments from council for staff to consider moving forward? And before I take those, I will also suggest that that I think staff's professional recommendation with regard to the energy use component is entirely appropriate and is the way we ought to go. That's my little pitch as you think about this over time. With that, Mr. Hess.
Thanks, Mayor. This will be before the Land Use and Planning Committee this Wednesday, I guess. And we'll have answers to some of the questions that came up last week, but an additional opportunity to talk about the various buffers and other things that are under consideration. And I wanted to just make a note as a point of process that I'll entertain motions to amend the proposal on Wednesday so that we have a clear sense going into the 29th what the committee's desire is. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hess. Ms. Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks. And I just want to echo what the mayor said. This is a great presentation. I have heard it twice, but I think that I kind of zero in on different parts of it. And I think it's great. I did not see it attached to the agenda tonight. And I'm wondering if we could get that up, because I think for anyone in the public that's interested in it, this is a really succinct way to go through all parts of it. And we have a lot of other attachments. So I just think it might be a good way for the public. You know, my biggest concern in this, honestly, is the energy usage component. I know we talked about that on last Wednesday, and we'll talk about it again this Wednesday. I like the idea for all the reasons you guys outlined about Title V, but my question is around, and I said this on Wednesday, but I'm going to ask it again since there are more people here, just about the timing of that and how quick, because that is a concern as well. So could you speak to the timing on that a little bit?
Yeah, we would be aiming to get this implemented by the end of February, January, if we can really get through those stakeholder meetings. But we do want to spend a little additional time researching and reaching out to the businesses, but February is the hope.
Thank you. And that was Cassie Trepard for the record, and Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. I too want to say I really appreciate all the work that has gone into this. This is a really complex issue, and I'm just blown away by all the information that you've been able to put together and give us to think about this. So thank you for that. I guess one question, and we can talk about this on Wednesday, is Title V. What triggers a business license renewal, and how often does that happen? I know that I know this, but I just can't remember. So I think it'd be really useful for me at least to know how that happens.
Renews on an annual basis, if I'm remembering correctly, having paid those fees and filled out the paperwork back.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Thank you.
Further discussion? All right, seeing none. Again, further opportunity to mull this over in land use and planning on Wednesday of this week, and then final consideration on the 29th. We have no more public hearings this evening, folks, but we do have a couple of items for final consideration. Again, these items have been subject to public hearing. The public hearing is now closed, and the council will take final action on these items this evening and codify them one way or another. So we'll begin with a funding recommendation for our Affordable Housing Trust Fund Innovation Funding Round and triannual affordable, no, we're not doing that. Just the recommendation for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Innovation Grant this time around. And I would welcome a motion from Ms. Jones.
Thank you. I'd be happy to make that motion. I'd like to make the motion that we approve the funding recommendation made by the Staff Scoring Committee to fund the United Way's Centralized Housing Solutions Fund for $26,250. And I'd like to speak to that.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you. I'm really happy that we are, well, I guess we have come so far in the last year and a half, and I just wanted to highlight that this may be only $26,000 that we are allotting for the first disbursement, but I just wanted to take a look back at how much has been accomplished in the last year and a half. A year and a half ago, we set up the framework for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And during that time, we have created the trust fund, created the oversight committee, and appointed people to the oversight committee. The oversight committee has created bylaws to administer the trust fund. And they were able to come up with this first round with a scoring system and evaluate several different propositions. And the recommendation of the scoring committee was to fund this, this request from the United Way. So I know that this was an educational process and that there were other applicants. And I think part of this first scoring round is setting expectations and creating some education and kind of figuring out how to use this fund. So I think it was very constructive for that. And I know that the money that was not dispersed is going to be held over, and we've got several rounds coming up in this next year. So we're starting to get some momentum. But I also just wanted to highlight the fact that in a year and a half to have come this far is really great in local government, because this is a heavy lift. So thanks to all of the people who have worked on this, and Emily Harris Shears and the Aaron Pehan and Montana James. They have done a lot of work on this, the oversight committee, and thank you to the applicants. And I know that this is a small disbursement, but I think it's a really strong step forward, and I'm looking forward to more rounds with more money. So I'm happy to support it tonight.
Thanks, Ms. Jones. So, pardon me, Ms. West and I serve on that oversight committee. We had a meeting last week, and I will just add that this round of innovation grants was subject of discussion, and we, the oversight committee, I think is very much looking forward to next round. We'll have a couple of rounds, and the committee is in the process of moving forward with its recommendation for the granting of roughly $3 million to support affordable housing in the community in a few buckets. Those conversations are really thoughtful and interesting, and we'll be getting, I think, lots of money on the ground and lots of return on that investment. So looking forward to that. Is there any discussion on the motion this evening? Ms. Hart.
I just want Marty to know that I will be recusing myself from this vote, as I was in my role as Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity, one of the applicants, and will recuse.
Thank you, Ms. Hart. Anyone in the audience care to comment? Seeing none, we've had a public hearing and have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund recommendations, Becerra.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Excuse me, yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Sorry, I skipped Harp. And I think Heather said she's abstaining.
Correct.
And Anderson.
Yes.
Sorry, Heather, I marked that off as soon as you said it, and so it wasn't highlighted for me anymore. We have 10 ayes, 1 abstention, and 1 absent.
And the motion is approved. Our second item for final consideration is a rezoning request at the mill site. And that happens in Mr. Hess's committee. Sir.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that on second and final reading, we adopt an ordinance amending the standards of the Mill Site Special Zoning District legally described in Exhibit A to remove the use restrictions on Moose Creek Trail and Silver Parkway in Subdistrict B and C.
That motion is in order. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, anyone in the audience care to comment this evening? Seeing nary a hand raised there, we'll have a roll call vote.
And on the, whoops, hang on. There I am. On the ordinance to zone, hang on. Contos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Hess,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Merritt,
Yes.
Ramos,
Yes.
Cheryl,
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
and Becerra.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 11 ayes, no one absent.
And the motion is approved. We don't have any items for final, any additional items for final consideration. I'll pass on communications from the mayor and we'll start comments from council members with Ms. Merritt.
I never get to go first. Well, the last couple of weeks I have been making pleas to folks to sign up to judge the speech and debate tournament, and that happened this past weekend. And I just want to give a shout out to all of the student competitors and all of the coaches from all 3 of our Missoula high schools, Sentinel, Big Sky, and Hellgate. It takes a tremendous amount of effort to pull off these types of tournaments. We had students from 13 different schools here in Missoula competing, and it was amazing. And I just think it's a really great experience for kids. And I imagine that a lot of the speech and debate kids end up being leaders in groups like this. So thanks to everybody for that.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated people taking the time to come out tonight and give public comment in support of the budget amendment to hire a full-time employee to implement our clean energy policy. It's really important. And I know there have been a lot of counselors who've worked hard on this for quite a few years, and it's try and make progress on a really huge issue. And it's nice to see the public paying attention and coming out and putting some sunshine on that. So thank you very much for that.
Ms. Becerra.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Ms. Hart.
Just want to announce that tomorrow night, Tuesday evening, November 16th, Habitat for Humanity of Missoula is co-sponsoring with the League of Women Voters a panel on that we are calling the next steps on the affordable housing continuum. Myself and Emily Harris Shears from our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, housing specialists, as well as Missoula Jordan Lyons, housing specialist, will be on that panel talking about what each of our agencies are doing to address affordability in our community. And I think it's going to be just a jam-packed session. And if you did not get to attend our town hall 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks ago, this is an opportunity to glean some really great information. Hope you can join us.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say really quick, go Grizz.
Mr. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to touch briefly on something. I actually read a really interesting article in the Wall Street Journal today that just talked about inflation and the devastating impacts it's been having on the entire country, as well as certainly our constituents are affected by that. It really did a good job of highlighting that one entity that's more or less protected, insulated from the inflation is the government, and local governments especially have really been benefiting, if you could call it, from inflation that's been affecting everybody. I mean, the Wall Street Journal mentioned New York City, for instance, and I get that a lot of these municipalities have sales taxes. They're especially benefiting from these, but New York City is north of 19% year over year growth in their budgets. A lot of other big cities are north of 20%. And I just think it's important that us as a council, I mean, I'm going to be off council in about a month, but just thought it was good to highlight that what we're seeing on the ground affecting us as our city budget is not what other people are seeing affect them with their local budget. So where we can, it would be really great if we could look and focus on cutting costs. I mean, as home prices skyrocket here, we get more revenue from that because of higher valuations. Even if we don't raise mills as much, we still get a lot of added revenue from it. We've seen it the last few budget cycles in a row. And in addition to that, the cost of homes continue to skyrocket benefiting us, but those homes become further and further out of reach of other constituents. So as much as we can do to lower costs, whether it's as simple as not putting something on the ballot, whether it's as simple as not raising something by 3%, whether that's water revenues, whether that's permitting revenues. I mean, we're getting a lot of money and a lot of major windfalls from the federal government that our constituents just aren't getting. We got millions, tens of millions of dollars from ARPA, CARES, and now infrastructure. So I think it'd be great if we could really focus on trying to pass some of those savings on to our constituents because they're going to need it. That's all I wanted to say and touch on. And I encourage everybody to look up that Wall Street Journal article that just talks about the boon that the government's getting while everybody else is really getting the short end of the stick and really struggling right now. So just wanted to bring that up. Thank you for your time.
And I'd really like to move communications from the mayor to the end of the council comments, but I'm not going to do that to you. There's a debate to be had over lunch, Mr. Ramos. Ms. West.
So I'm just going to remind people that there is a hula hooping clinic, I believe this Friday at Lowell School that's hosted by Parks and Rec. So if people want to sign up and attend, I think that has to be done by Wednesday. I personally would love to be a better hula hooper. So I think my family and I will be going. And I also just want to congratulate the Missoula FFA team. I got to go with my middle schooler to Bozeman this weekend for the Ag Expo, and the Missoula FFA team placed in the top 3 in most of the events that they entered. So we've got an amazing, smart group of.
Thank you, Ms. West. I will be the instructor at that hula hoop workshop. So please note that if that changes your mind about any of this in any way. Ms. Cheryl, I'm not going to be the hula hoop person.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Contos.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Mr. Hess.
I'll pass. Thanks.
And Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. A few things I wanted to touch on today. I should have mentioned this earlier during the proclamation, but speaking with Small Business Saturday, there have been a lot of supply chain issues for a lot of the big box stores. So I would encourage everyone to go to your local stores and support your neighbors in your community for all of your Christmas gifts this season. Also, on Thursday was Veterans Day. I wanted to thank all of our veterans for their service. And I wanted to thank everyone who stood in the blizzard during the ceremony at the Doughboy statue. It was the first time my little boy saw snow, so he enjoyed it. And then finally, since we're not meeting next week, I would like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and please travel safe. Thank you.
Thank you all. We will move on to committee reports. Items here weren't approved unanimously, and we'll take a little time this evening to hear a motion and debate the issue before the body. Our lone committee report this evening is happening in Ms. Anderson's committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I'm trying to toggle between screens and unmuting myself. So yes, let's see. So we will have a presentation from Police Chief Jason White on the recommended motion to approve the purchase of a decontamination equipment from Cart Clean of Missoula, Montana, in the amount of $36,850. I do believe that Chief White is joining us and can give a couple brief words about what it is that we're purchasing and what funds we're using to purchase.
Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Jason White with the Missoula Police Department. We are looking for approval to purchase 4 pieces of equipment that we would use for decontamination of items that come into the police department, either as lost, stolen, or found property, or to be able to sanitize our uniforms and gear. So those 4 items, one would be large, like a conveyor belt, like you see going into the airport, where we would put the material into the device, it would go through the conveyor belt. It would be subject, all of these devices have UVC light radiation that decontaminates against viruses, including coronavirus and bacteria, to make it safer for our volunteers and officers that handle not only their own uniforms, but items that come into the police department. The other 2 devices are locker styles, where you could hang articles of clothing in there, such as uniforms, to go through the decontamination process. And the 4th is a portable incident bag that we would be able to take out on scene to decontaminate devices. The cost of it is $36,850 for all 4 devices. This money is coming to us from a federal grant through the U.S. Department of Justice. It was money that was allocated to the department in June of 2020, and we are nearing the end of that grant cycle. So we would be using that grant money. It would not be coming out of general fund or out of the department's mainline budget. The company that we are trying to buy these through is a Missoula-based company, so we would be spending that money locally here as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. We have a motion that is in order. Is there discussion on the motion? Ms. Wasika.
Thanks. So I'm the reason why this is on committee reports tonight, and I have to apologize to Chief White because after doing some research and doing some remembering on my ride-alongs, I realized that this equipment is very much necessary, and that's why I would like that we have committee meetings for the initial discussion of it, and then we don't have the final vote for a couple of days so that you can do some research about questions that you have. So after reading some public comment and talking to some police officers and looking at my notes from my ride-alongs that I took, I think that this is absolutely necessary for the safety of our officers and for the volunteers. So I'm going to absolutely be supporting this tonight.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you so much, Chief, for the presentation, and Mayor for the opportunity to quickly speak. I was supportive of this in committee and will continue to do so. I think that there was a bit of misconception with some of the public comment that we had on what type of equipment we were purchasing. And as Chief White in his presentation sort of outlined, these are, kind of multi-capacity, larger pieces, smaller portable pieces. So it gives a variety of options of how to decontaminate and that are, depending on what it is that you're trying to decontaminate, that would be a lot easier than potentially using a hand wand or some sanitary wipes or something like that. And, you know, this is grant funding, and we want to do everything we can to keep those in our community who protect and serve us protected as well. So thank you for utilizing this grant funding. And it's good to make sure that we use all of it because we don't want to lose it. And so I will be in support of this item.
Seeing no further discussion, anyone in the audience care to comment this evening? And seeing no hands raised there, we will have a roll call vote.
All right, sorry. Here we go. Harp.
Yes.
Hess.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Merritt.
Yes.
Ramos.
Yes.
Cheryl.
Yes.
Vasika.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
And Contos.
Yes.
That is 11 ayes and 1 absent.
And the motion is approved. We don't have any more committee reports, nor do we have any new business. Are there any additional items to be referred this evening? Seeing none of those, any miscellaneous communications, reports, petitions, or announcements? Once again, seeing none, as always, I thank you for your service, and we will be adjourned.